you say boo?
Yes. I don't know what to say, Mike. I'm just watching you.
All right.
Sweet new chords.
Let me grab mine.
That was the worst.
So tiny.
I know, right?
It's like a baby guitar.
It's a ukulele.
It is. It's a baritone ukulele.
Oh.
No, you were right. You were totally right. There.
Yeah, it's called a baritone ukulele, dude. I have one.
You have a uke?
Yes, and I have drums. Because
That's
I love
awesome.
drums.
All right, cool. And you got our music? Sweet.
Good morning.
Totally trusted you. Good morning. No, I won't sit.
Dang it.
Mine too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that'll be good for now. Just for practice.
There we go.
I told you. Smooth words will
I did like quite a bit. I love this.
so
Wait, was it snow day yesterday or something like that?
I think so. I didn't.
What'd you do yesterday?
I went to church like 6 here, and then I mostly just hang around my house. I don't do exciting things.
Huh?
I said I do not do exciting things on weekends.
Wait, you do not what?
I do not do like exciting stuff on weekends.
What about on weekdays?
Nope.
Do you ever do exciting stuff?
Yes.
Like what?
Going here.
What?
Going here counts.
There we go. God.
and then start Magical Dream Unicorn.
Were there like skis or snowboards there?
Yes.
No.
Video.
Vomiting. And his vomit was
I
like,
mean, some people do,
his
but
vomit was
not
this
not
rose colored I've seen.
But yeah, no,
It
other
was
than
like a smooth, like a bluish yellow.
don't do it, Jaden. Don't do it.
Jake, I will go.
What?
You wanna lose that pool cue? Lose that pool.
No, it wasn't.
First place you can
Maybe?
lose a toe. Take it. It's tax. No, I used to fill one of those holes.
I mean, it would have been
No.
like humanity.
Are you going to steal?
Yeah, I put it down.
My sister's please.
I'm gonna bring it back for different songs. So that's good to know. Oh, since that song is just
That
set for
is
both
the-
over again, I'm gonna kind of jump around and
Somewhere around the 30th.
do instrumentals and stuff, so it won't trip you up because it's just the same chords.
March
So I
30th
don't
or
want to stick
3rd.
to like going back and
Yeah.
forth. Don't get scared.
March
I'm
3rd
I'm
or
just
March
jumping
30th?
around. Awesome, man. Well
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
You're
Which-
good to
which
go.
one?
I'll let you know
Yeah.
when we start.
I just answered your question.
March 3rd?
Where should I put your guitar?
Oh my god. Is it on March 30th? Or on March 3rd?
Yeah.
March
It's on
3rd.
March 3rd.
Oh, that was weird.
What the?
Support it.
Try it
Oh yeah,
once.
here.
March 3rd.
Sorry, that didn't work.
March 3rd.
It's also
March
set up
33rd.
for guitarists to go through that thing, so it's not. it
March
won't let
3rd.
me
When on March 3rd?
Change it, but I can get Andy to change it for us.
Hold on.
Maybe next
Daniel?
week. Maybe so.
Daniel,
Yeah.
Try to
what night
erase that.
is nerd night on?
No, you gotta bounce it off here, over into that guy. It's gonna bounce into the 8 ball, ricochet over here, and it's gonna be in a terrible position.
Where's that?
I'm sorry, I cannot. Oh, dang it.
Wait, but is it on March? Is it on March
But you
3rd?
almost gave me a perfect.
Or
You get solid?
February 3rd?
Dang it.
February 30th? Or March 3rd?
Yeah.
March 3rd.
Good morning, Darcy.
Never mind. You're so good.
I just said good morning. You're sorry. Oh, what am I doing?
Daniel.
Hide nails all over.
Oh my gosh.
Good to go again.
Never mind.
Do you not know there's a stack of tires right there?
I know
There
I
is?
won't look you out
Yeah.
again.
Well,
That's because you know.
do we play video
It's
games?
just more fun to pull your leg in.
No.
Morning.
Okay, thank you so much.
Not if you're gonna ruin their game.
I didn't ruin it.
Yeah, you did.
So-
You just not
No, I didn't. I
Said
didn't
the
ruin
little
it.
Lie about it.
strange-
I didn't ruin it. See?
Oh.
See?
And so,
And it's
You
still
would've made that if it was
close.
back
it just wasn't there.
No, you would have not.
How do you know that?
And then-
Because it was like right.
Well, it's sick,
It
so
was like right
we're
here.
not really
You
in a
know
good
it.
place to not
Yeah.
get on
Oh,
this.
dang it.
It was like
Sorry.
right.
Well, not anymore.
Why?
You lost that.
I'm not sure
There's
what it is,
some.
but
This is actually like a
You'll
church
somehow have to make it do.
How do I make it do?
Make sure without video games.
Well, I can't.
You just-
it was actually I was trying to figure out
Why?
as the week got closer and closer to Saturday,
Yes, I
like
can.
how do I take our anniversary today?
And you know if I'm running at you angrily with the pool cue, you get something else.
But you won't be
So,
angry
you know,
with
that's what you'd love to be. And so I was trying to figure out
If I could get both of
Is
them.
that a bet you're willing to take?
Yeah.
Alright.
Thank you very much.
What? The 10.
Thank you very much.
That stops the 3.
And so
That
I got
should be
home.
possible.
She was home, I took care of Jane. We got to talk a whole bunch, and then I went to go put her Jane to bed, which actually worked that first night. And while I'm putting Jane to sleep,
Okay,
Emily
thank you
gets
for
down
the easy shot.
and walks out, and then
But you're still gonna miss, dude.
That's the 13 on there.
Watch out. You might
and
get
like
hit.
while I was putting Jane to bed,
Yeah.
the doorbell had
Jane
rung.
bounces off the neighbor's wall of magic.
And like I brought the food in, set it, and I went back, like putting Jane to
This
sleep.
game
You
is
guys might
about
want to
friction.
And
go.
so
Oh, I
stepped over Jane's food to go to the kitchen to put the milk out. like didn't even it was ridiculous. And so she's back out in the living room.
That was not. No, it wasn't all.
The first half.
You're solid.
But then yeah, Emily tried when Jane had woken up.
Ooh, you just gave me a good shot.
To get Jane to go to sleep. She just let her fall asleep. So I
Not
just
even.
stopped knowing. She was in there for an hour and a half. And then she comes in and she was just like, patience gone during the first 30 minutes. And she was like about to yell at the baby. She was so loud. And so then I took her, I got her down. After about 30 minutes of her just physically just like trying to rock her and she's like climbing on the table and just like she's
I'm gonna take a picture.
so when
Oh!
And you just got yourself out.
You
You
lost.
just got yourself out.
You hit the
these
8 ball.
weird angles,
I made a
Well,
ball.
the game.
I couldn't feel my fingers and my wrists would unbend.
No.
And so I'm sitting there for 5 minutes.
Yeah, you won.
You like-
You won.
I don't want to wake her up yet. I don't know what I'm thinking. I know it's not getting. It's not time for bed. It's like I can't put her. So I'm like trying. It was such a weird night. Well, they were my parents were up, but no, they were just really knocked up. I felt like I had pressed
Still gotta be
into my
perfect.
wrists. So it was
No, why'd you do that?
Yeah, that's exactly how it happened.
But I have.
I'm not.
I'm editing them as we speak. I'm just taking them and trimming off. None of the GoPro footage has got stopped. So there's like 20 seconds of awesome, followed by an 8-minute break. So I'm just trimming off all of that.
Andrew.
I was on the whole video as I said was explaining.
Shut up.
I'm talking about it. I got extra shots. Yeah, I'm not necessarily.
Oh, God.
What?
I do like berries.
High school again.
Oh.
There's some.
I'll look right after.
Oh, yeah.
What are you doing? Get out of here.
No.
Yeah, it is.
It's not really.
Is that what you?
Redo that too. Okay, good. So close. That was a good try.
Maybe you should have read the girls.
Yeah, I actually think
The fourth video is. It still worked out. The fourth video is and she got pushed.
Alicia gave
Pretty
you a
good
good
shot,
shot.
like nudge over the edge. Push is not what it was meant to be. It was be like, here you go, nudge over the edge.
Wait, that was really bad.
Oh no.
And so she has like far now. Other groups,
Hands up
no one went like Andrew's arm. And she
Okay.
and she just had a great ride. Right to the end.
Jake, maybe you fix
I'm
it.
not. I'm taking a
Just
picture
so
of
you're
myself.
going sideways, and that's perfect.
Oh no.
Slammed right over there.
Oh no.
So she was a little sore when she got it. But epic run. The video's pretty good. I can't wait to watch it. Wouldn't even have I've been here every week, so thank you so much. We had like multiple kids calling to say, oh, outside with the snow. You know, like, how bad is it gonna be? You know, and she thought that just being in the snow would, and so she was really this guy had never experienced this, so she didn't know what to expect. So she had a really good time. She was a little timid about each, didn't know how to do sledding, but she got over it.
It's on me.
You had made it in there. You totally
Yes,
made
it
it.
is. It is on me. She can't play basketball with me because I win. She doesn't like when they're with me because I should win. And he doesn't want to
I didn't realize he drew me to one of our camps.
like nothing about it.
So he just has like that church brain hair thing going on.
Taking it up myself, I don't know.
That's also possible. I didn't ask you that.
After two shots, you have to stop. Yeah, the rules just because.
I don't know if you missed. That's a legendary dog.
Perfectly lined up too.
And he barely took it back. Mark Woodson.
So hit.
And then Andrew and Zane's dad, Mike Parker.
That's what I wanted.
So we got out last Saturday, we're standing in the parking lot about to take my car out of their cars. Going,
How do you get to your soul?
so we did stuff like our hair. We kept it all fit. And then I got to just, and with Mark Storingo, that's like
Hey, we know. I took a funny. I took a and I put it on your story.
stuck it on his car, I'll move it.
With the cone on the side of your face. See, look at you. Look at it. No!
James back in the eight ball.
Hey, I made one shot.
They're gonna be, and then he's like, that's fine, there's no rush.
It's not really big acting.
Okay.
That's all we're kind of in that pocket.
Oh wait, table scrap.
Yes, yeah, don't feel like you need to talk to us. But yeah, just.
Maybe if you try like hitting them, like trying to get them into the pockets,
You might go in.
might go in.
No, last night,
Exact same shot.
No way. Oh my god. Whole pocket.
You gotta call it.
Oh, you're such a good brother.
That's the rules.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, he's getting that graphics card and he's gonna get to the right one. She can have a graphics card.
The reason you didn't make it.
Don't be
I
calm.
actually have a few that but hers just looks.
I'm champion.
It's alright. We'll forfeit that rule.
My only reference to
We all the people.
That's 15 points on the score. Yeah, no, I 15 points off.
Wait, what?
Well, how cool is that? In the same pocket and lands it. And he
Okay.
not only is he instant,
Why did you think
Mom, you just hitting me.
Positioning.
And
On that
all you
top.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think you're positioned over there.
positioning. I won't.
you're hurting yourself, and the longer you go, the less
I'll go
effective.
put it in the phone.
No. No.
And that's just a fact. The less patient you are, the shot, the less clear-headed you are. I've been in the same situation. I'm sure I've done the same stupid thing.
We're making plays.
Both
We're
of
making
y'all
plays.
30 minutes.
Wait, let me take one more picture. One more picture of me. Yeah.
It's almost like you want to not to.
Yeah.
Who's right there?
Of me, I promise to be okay. Promise.
You were
Oh, that game!
It's going in.
He never called a pocket.
Yeah, we took
Yeah, you
out.
give us back to
I
five out to the
promise I'll
rest
take
of
it
them.
of me. I promise I'll take it of you. And I'll show you afterwards.
Okay,
Oh,
double.
you lost. You're out of here. He's like Jane.
Hey, me and Jaden versus Andrew. That was weird.
Wait, let me take a picture of me. I promise I won't take a picture of you.
We'll swap cues. I know those are good.
Let's play double.
Hey, me and Jaden.
I mean, I promise I won't take it of you.
And I had weekend, I had to go to the just need to half a day. And
Wait, how'd you even
I mean, even my mom, who runs 3 when my dad started work, he's, another, and she's like, "Mom, Jane."
Me.
Stop crying.
You're gonna calm down for me.
It's just have that sense. Even if they literally feel
Nine. Seven.
it, it is a
Six.
Hit me 11.
Hit me 11.
Hit me 11.
Yeah, I got that. You gotta go reverse.
No, don't
Reverse it on the side.
What do you?
I'm just texting my friend. My friend, Stop it. No.
Yes.
What are you doing?
Yes.
And so when you go out, almost had that, but you like, if I've had Jane for too long, she's happy to see everything.
Hey, you didn't get that one.
It's not like I missed that. It's like, oh, this is a trick shot.
Already
I
question.
just-
Trick shot.
No,
Off
it's
this,
just literally,
that.
okay, you're good at this.
Nothing.
Solid.
And so,
you're kind of staying on my phone.
Yeah.
Different color, different sound.
What are you doing?
And there's like a background music after you hit the first button. And it used to be kind of a slapsticky, I'm flailing.
Hit those days. Yo, there is a time limit.
Pressing the button. And she's
Thank you.
What? My friend just asked me a question.
Just a minute.
so she gets her hands over her
No! What?
I'm gonna hit 7 on this side. Who's gonna ricochet?
Are you even taking pictures of yourself? You know the flash is on.
People always talk about the word lizards like I should know who they are. And
They're a big family.
I feel terrible. I don't know why.
I'm saving it for you. You'll save me.
Oh, he's legendary.
Alright, James, Chris and her little brother who are like from that marriage. So, my age, and she's 9, she's huge and wonderful. And she's just
Oh my, I thought that was gonna go in.
Jade, you're like, she's giving me a little right. Oh, yeah, it's an easy shot.
No, it's not.
He's missing.
I can't shoot left-handed. No, I can't shoot left-handed.
Then you gotta shoot behind your back.
The flash is on. I know it's pointing at you.
Be gentle.
The flash is on.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is. Then why does it keep going over
and
that?
having
Oh
this.
my. I shouldn't be probably gonna do this.
That wasn't me! No!
Take it again. No! What did I even do? What did I even do?
This type of stuff, this do it intentionally. It's like this, like just a picture.
It is a little boring, but it's interesting. Based on the
Hey, use my voice.
What?
Just her hands are just doing this.
Saved it for you.
She has the desire.
She gets lucky.
I grabbed something.
Sometimes it happens.
She doesn't necessarily know what that thing is. It's just, it lined up. It worked.
Oh my god, what'd you do?
I don't know, look at the video that I saved for you. Just look at the video. Look at the video. Look at the video.
What? Oh, hey, look at there.
There you go. Ah!
Don't even know how you do that. It's fine.
Look at the video.
Oh, I gotta give him
And so the,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is easy money.
it doesn't like bump it out of its rotation.
So he walked up and gave it a 20 and it somehow managed to
Why did it stop?
Did you see the video?
No, I haven't seen the video.
Look at the video. Look at the video. It's hilarious.
How many movies did you
worry about it.
Throw the rattle.
Why would you do that?
Is it here working?
No!
She likes you?
No! I don't! Nothing. Don't do that again.
She took a video of you? Aaron! She took
Let's go. Mine is 10. It's 10 and he's hitting it so hard. It's all
Easy one.
Easy one. Why did you do that?
Like BD.
That's creepy. That's
No, it's hard. Right.
That deep voice.
You sent it to all these people. Well, maybe for you, it's not them arms.
Yo, you gotta hit it in the air. Yo, you did it ours!
It's over here.
And his.
It's over here.
You said don't keep
I'm gonna make you
Yeah, that's what you keep
No,
Hey, Bluebird, it's fine.
Why'd you do this?
If you miss any shot
I already have
in this over,
Brett, call your phone. Yeah, oh, you got it.
If they call it, that's great. Because they can't right here.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, you want me to hit that? No.
Why?
What are you doing? Oh, it doesn't hit. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh my god. Change the clock.
Yeah, right here, right here.
Let's get it. Alright. Alright, I caught it. That pocket. That pocket.
I will join.
Hey, is that your fault?
How did I?
And if you shoot out, you can't hit anywhere behind it.
You know what? I'm gonna go to the
No, he's not behind the two down.
No, he is. Yeah.
Clutch. Ooh.
I can't not pin on.
Get that.
This is gonna be a very close game.
Miss.
We didn't do that when you did the airball stone.
Get the ball.
It's your fault. No, I'll cover for lunch.
No!
Left side,
Yo.
Big job!
Hey, Big Chuck, you put in one ball.
Wait, get up the finger, game.
Spin it. I know, spin it.
We'll turn the lights off.
Go down to Jake.
I'm mad now. Give me my phone.
Wait, just a minute. You know how you
No! No! Oh! Yeah, we win! We win! That wasn't gonna go in! Yeah, what?
Guys, come have a seat. Find a seat.
Eric, come on. You're trash. I won it. I got
all
I won all our points. I had all of them.
This is the winner's killer. You guys don't get this.
I had all of them. And you know it. Eric. I had all of them. I can't believe it.
Carry it.
No, it's a person rolling down a hill. Get him in a bigger snowball. Yeah.
apparently when you weigh 3 times as much as the kids, you don't go very far. This is the best run of the day.
We probably should have had it facing forward.
That last little turn, she was in complete mid-air and turned upside down and then landed on her head.
Oh.
See, Daniel, look, the footage might have been better. You flipped the camera facing forward.
Yeah.
No, because then you would see white. Just white. That's
Not
it.
necessarily because you'd see the trees that are green.
Yeah, about 500 feet away.
Oh,
Just some
you'd
nice scenery. You had white.
You also see like a mountain.
Yeah, that'd make for a good video.
Oh, cheap.
Send it to like Planet Earth or something.
That's funny.
Yeah, you and me next time, all stars.
All stars.
All right, guys.
Hey, look, white and trees.
And mountains.
You got what you asked for.
Yeah.
All right. Daniel, could you open us in prayer?
Sure. Oh wait, could someone go turn off the air hockey cans? I just noticed. Now that
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
watching videos, it's like still running. Thanks. That's much better. Lord, we thank you for another chance to come and worship you. We ask, Lord, that you would enter this place right now. Just make your presence known. Help us to connect with you right now so that we are not just singing a song, Lord, but we're worshiping. Lord, we want our whole lives to be an act of worship, but we want right now to walk into your presence and lift you up. So as we sing these songs, just help us to focus, to not be thinking about other things, but just you. Help us, Lord, to do that right now. We ask that in your name. Amen.
You spoke and worlds were formed. You breathed and life was born. You knew that one day you would come. So far from heaven's throne, clothed in human form, you showed the world the Father's love. You gave your life away. You gave your life away. You gave your life away for me. Your grace has broken every chain. My sins are gone, my debt's been paid. You gave your life away for me, for me. Sinless life, yet you were crucified. You bought our freedom on the cross, forsaken for our sin. You died and rose again. Jesus, you are the Lamb of God. You gave your life away. You gave your life away. You gave your life away for me. Your grace has broken every chain. My sins are gone, my debt's been paid. You gave your life away for me, for me. How glorious is your love. If I could sing forever, it's not enough. How glorious is your love. If I could sing forever, it's not enough. You gave your life broken, every chain. My sins are gone, my debt's been paid. You gave your life away for me, for me. There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Could you guys stand for me, please, if you're not already? Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. So there's nothing worth more. There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcomed here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience no place I would rather be, no place I would rather be than here in your love, here in your love. No place I would rather be, no place I would rather be, no place I would rather be than here in your love, here in your love, here in your love. Sing that again. There's no place I would rather be, no place I would rather be, no place I would rather be than here in your love, here in your love. There's no place I would rather be, no place I would rather be, no place I would rather be than here in your love, here in your love. So set a fire down in my soul that I can't contain, that I can't control, 'cause I want more of you, God. I want more of you, God. Set a fire down in my soul that I can't contain, that I can't control, 'cause I want more of you, God. I want more of you, God. More of you, God. There's no place I'd rather be, no place I would rather be, no place I would rather be than here in your love, here in your love. God, I pray as we sing those words out, Lord, we really mean them in our hearts, Lord, that you would just meet us here, God, and that there would be another place we'd rather be than with you in your presence, God. We know that you're here with us, and we just cannot thank you enough for that amazing honor, Lord. Thank you for meeting us here. Thank you for every single person here. I pray, Lord, you bless this time as we get into your word. Please speak through Daniel as he teaches us, as always, Lord, and just help us to understand a little bit more of you today, God. Help us draw closer to you. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Lexi. All right, guys, if you didn't bring your own Bible, get up and get one.
This couch is like 10 pounds.
Oh, I have to see like that.
We can see somebody.
Hey, there's no video. There's a video. There's a video. It's just a prank. There's no food for you.
No, I'm good.
Adam, you sure? You wanna be
Yeah.
part of the cool
You
kids
can't
now?
go out. My friend is blind.
What?
I said you can't go out this side. I have to change that back.
Alrighty. Who was there last week?
I don't know if I was here last week.
Some of you guys? Not all you guys? Very few of you guys?
Was I here last week?
Can I get through here? This is the main and mostly the only opening into the circle.
Yeah, I moved that wheelie chair so far away. How did it end back over here?
I don't know. That's really weird.
Get out of here.
It's really strange.
Little gremlins came to the night.
Yeah, you came in the night.
I did.
Not working.
Alright.
Do you think you're gonna win this?
Daniel, you're huge.
We've already discussed.
Daniel, you're
as a
yoked.
baby, his patience is rock hard, solid.
Alright, hey, give up. Let's go.
You can't shake him. He will not win.
Daniel, just sit
Yeah, I
in
need
the
a
chair.
focus, Daniel.
Daniel, use your
Bring it
spin
right
jitsu
over
on
here.
it.
Daniel, just sit in
Right
the
over
chair.
here.
If I sit in the chair, she'll be able to move me.
Oh yeah,
Because it's
got
got wheels on it.
Yo,
Yeah, damn.
Man of Steel.
Oh.
Got you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Except now I can't see you.
Ah, that's just fine,
A little
Daniel. Don't
dangerous.
you worry about it for a second.
That's a little dangerous. Alright, so. Do I have lasers? Oh, no, laser. Okay,
So right here.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
last week we were looking at
now you can see
2
me.
Thessalonians
Yeah, man.
in our study through the entire Bible. What is that clicky clacky noise? Yeah, okay.
Wait, you should just make her sit in the middle.
That. Are you playing with the lever? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's broken. It's been broken since we had the couch. It's never worked.
Oh.
So
That's
just give
kind of
up.
why we have it.
Give up now.
Didn't we say
Alright.
no reclining chairs in class?
See, you're old enough to remember that rule.
Oh,
It hasn't really been a problem
that's a
recently.
legacy rule.
Legacy rules.
OG rule.
Anyways,
OG.
let's get back to the Bible. Last week we were in 2 Thessalonians. We are moving through the entire Bible in order. And does anyone know what comes after 2 Thessalonians?
Third Thessalonians.
1 Timothy. Well done. Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember my little mnemonic trick, but all the T's in the New Testament are touching. The T's touch. So after 1 and 2 Thessalonians, then comes 1 and 2 Timothy, and then comes Titus. Good job. So then that's it. That's all the T's. There's no other T's in the New Testament. Just those 5. Yeah, question.
Except for
So
3rd
we're
John.
not going to be in 1 Timothy. Are we going to be in 4th Thessalonians?
Thessalonians.
Thessalonians.
Purposeful.
Thessalonians.
Wouldn't it be
Also
third?
T in Testament.
No,
so.
4th.
4th. So
It would
there's
be
no
third because we.
No, 3rd.
Daniel, you missed the T-book.
I missed a T-book?
3rd John.
3rd John. I always counted it as a number, but that's just,
It begins with a T.
that's just me. I don't know. Anyways, so last week we were looking at 2 Thessalonians, and we saw in Thessalonica, both for the first book and the second book, Paul had kind of the same topic because they were going through the same stuff. I mean, there was changes, there was little differences, but the major theme in both books was suffering, because the Christians in Thessalonica were suffering. And that didn't change between the first and second book. Close to a year went by and still they were suffering. It didn't cease. The people in Thessalonica were still mostly not Christians. The Christians were a minority. And they were getting picked on big time. Huge amounts of persecution. So that was all happening on Paul's 3rd missionary journey. Now we're going to leap from this point a little bit further down the road. Oh no, wait, that was all, my bad. That was all on the 2nd missionary journey. We're going to leap much further down the road to Paul's 3rd missionary journey, where Paul goes through Ephesus again. It's one of his favorite places, Ephesus. But when he's in Ephesus on his 3rd journey, he finds out, you know what? They're not doing so good here. And they do better when I'm around, and they don't do well when I'm not around. It would be really cool if I could just stay here all the time. But he's a traveling missionary. He needs to keep moving. He needs to be able to go to lots of places and keep spreading the gospel. So what he does is kind of halfway in between. He takes the best of both worlds, and he says, hey, Timothy, you've been faithful. You've been with me like nonstop on multiple journeys, going all over the place. What do you think about becoming a pastor? Quitting the traveling missionary thing and just planting yourself and being a pastor. What do you think about that? And so Timothy ends up becoming in charge of the church in Ephesus. And so what we have here in 1 Timothy is Paul writing a letter to Timothy. Now there's a bit of span of time in between Timothy becoming the pastor of Ephesus and Timothy getting this letter from Paul. There's a gap. So let's see. We've got Ephesians back in 61 AD. We've got 1 Timothy in 62 to 64. We're not sure exactly, probably closer to 64 AD. This is right before Paul goes into prison. He writes to the entire church and Timothy. This is right after Paul gets out of prison. So he's finally a free man again, and he's thinking, I'll come see you soon. So that's actually in the letter, I'll try and come see you soon. We're pretty sure it never really works out, because he's still saying, I think I'll come see you soon by the time he gets to 2 Timothy a few years later. So pretty sure he never made it. But he keeps writing to Timothy. He's really close with Timothy. He loves Timothy. And so he keeps on writing. So these 3 letters, Ephesians is actually kind of to Timothy. 1 and 2 Timothy are to Timothy. So 3 letters to this guy, because now he's been a pastor for, by the end of the 2nd letter, about 15 years. He was put into the church in Ephesus around 51, 52 AD, somewhere in that range. And so he's been a pastor for a while. But he's still getting these letters from Timothy or from Paul, and they're kind of instructional in the sense of, hey, I know you don't really know how to be a pastor because no one ever really trained you for that. You just kind of got dropped into that role. But also, it's like, you do know what you're doing, but I'm older than you. So here's some tips. Here's some direction to go in. And so he does this a lot for Timothy, and it's actually really helpful to guys like me. It's actually helpful to junior hires like you. Can anyone imagine why a book to a pastor would be helpful for junior hires?
A book?
A book for a pastor would be helpful for junior hires. Can you imagine why or how?
No, not
Yes?
books.
So you can spread the gospel.
Okay.
Why would
Very
this
good.
book about pastors be good for junior hires? This book is about pastors.
Yeah, that's what I was just explaining.
That's 5 minutes.
Yep.
Full.
Oh, yes, thank you. Blind,
Um,
apparently.
It could make them want to be pastors.
Could make them want to be pastors? Okay. Guess that's possible. Yeah. The way this shakes out, think about this for a second. Paul is an older guy. Timothy's a younger guy. So most of the advice is going to be from someone older to someone younger. But the other flip side is Timothy's a young.
was a junior hire.
No, he's not. He's not
Yeah,
a junior
no,
high.
I
He's not
figured
that.
that.
He's
He's a
not
junior
that
high.
young.
Oh, he just came up from 6th grade.
Yeah, there you go. No.
6th grade missionaries to 7th grade pastors. Yeah.
No, what it turns out is that Timothy is a young guy in the midst of a bunch of older people. So he's a pastor, he's a young man,
I know,
but that doesn't mean his whole church is filled with people younger than him.
I know, but like,
He's a pastor and his whole church is filled with people older than him.
so no one's even.
No, I didn't say no one, but it's full of a lot of adults that are older than him.
Will you?
And here, nobody's older than Sam.
So that's not even close to true, but okay. You guys ever been downstairs when I was teaching downstairs in the main sanctuary?
Yes.
Okay, so is that room filled with only people younger than me?
Yes.
No.
Really?
There's Sam. There's
Clearly.
There's Sam.
my
You're
dad.
gonna name
There's
everyone
the retired
older
Green
than me?
Beret. There
The retired
is.
Green Beret.
You're
gonna try and name every person older than me.
There's
I was
Mike
gonna try
Kennedy.
and like statuate
There's
every
Terry
single person.
Kennedy.
There's Omar Franklin.
There's my father. There's my mother.
Oh,
my
yeah.
mother and my father.
I feel like we could be here a long time, Jaden, if you tried to actually go through and
I
name
know
each
most
person.
people.
He knows most people. Okay, alright, fair enough. I believe you.
All here.
The point is, if I go downstairs and teach, if Timothy stands up in the church in Ephesus, a lot, if not most, of the people in the room listening are older than the guy talking.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay. Can we stop looking at the technicalities of it? Most.
I know, but not necessarily. You can't say most of them.
I can look around the room and I can count the gray heads versus the not gray heads, and I can
Well,
go,
does not mean all.
Just because they
Wait,
have gray hair doesn't
okay,
mean they're
Daniel.
older than you.
Yeah?
stop thinking about the technicalities.
Well,
Stop
you
thinking about the
can't say
Dion,
technicalities.
we're not
You
dealing
can't
in
say that
absolutes.
because-
He's
We're
not
not
saying
dealing in
all or
absolutes.
none.
just because they have gray hair.
I'm not saying we have to
doesn't
actually
mean-
number them and count and make sure it's more than 50%. I'm
You
just
look
saying.
like
Just because they smell like an old person, look like an old person, absolutely resemble an old person, does not mean they're actually an old person. Daniel.
They're
They could have
15
Benjamin
years
Button
old.
disease.
Yeah, or,
Wait.
or they get a gray hair.
Stop.
That doesn't mean they look like.
Alright, on the off chance they have Benjamin Button disease, we'll go ahead and say, rather than most of them, we'll just say,
No,
old
no,
people
no.
exist. Are you going to argue with me? Old people exist?
Yeah.
Leave. Right now, leave. We're done.
They call
Get
elderly
out.
people. Not old people. That's
Old
what
people
we
don't
do.
exist in his
No,
mind.
old people don't exist.
They
because
don't
in
exist.
God's eyes, old people don't exist.
I would like you to go into the main sanctuary, and I would like you to count all the old people that don't exist.
Okay,
Come
I
back.
thought they were the highest first
Come
one.
back.
He's
Daniel,
okay.
Give me a number. Give me a
Kennedy,
number of
Terry
how many old
Kennedy,
people
Sam
don't
Allen.
exist,
I will do that.
and then we'll talk.
All right.
Then we'll talk. Okay.
All right. There is 1,000 old people in that sanctuary that do not exist.
Okay.
So now that you've spoken your piece, for the rest of today, do not open your mouth. Because the book is about a young pastor speaking to old people. And if you want to argue with that, you're going to have to read 1 Timothy first. So we're just going to talk about what the book's about. We're not going to argue about who's in what room or how old they are. Done? Thank you. Okay. With that all said, we're now looking at a book that's written right around somewhere between that 62-64 zone. It's after Paul gets released from prison, but we don't know exactly how long after. There's not a lot of his journeys between 62 and 64, that are told to us. The book of Acts kind of stops following him at this point. Luke was the guy writing the book, and he was trailing Paul all over the place. And then we're guessing Luke went home while he was in prison because we stopped getting details about Paul's journeys. So at this point, we don't really know where exactly he went or how long he was in any one place. And so we just know it was in this period when he wrote the book. We don't actually know like what town he was in, what he was doing, any of that stuff. So anyways, to the book itself. I think I have a map for
Paul's
you.
first letter.
Nope, we have a video. Okay, so what we're going to watch is a summary of the book of 1 Timothy. It's going to give you the overall structure.
How many minutes?
It's very short, but in the video you're going to see there's different sections in the book. We're going to zoom in today on one particular section and read it together, but I just wanted you guys to get the whole book. Now, the whole book, as I said, is advice for a pastor, but remember that it is advice for a young guy who has to be in charge of all ages, which includes older people too. And so if you would like to see the specifics of the advice, I recommend you read 1 Timothy. It's not that long. What it gives you, which is really cool at your age, is how do you deal with people who are older than you who do things wrong?
How to ask for people's age. That's a trickier one.
No. Forget the asking exactly how old they are. Forget it. Just leave it out of your brain.
Ask
Well,
what
okay,
ask one's age.
The point is, if you are young, and if someone is older than you, and they're doing something wrong, what are you supposed to do about it?
Tell them they smell like
So
an
this is
old
what
person.
1 Timothy tackles, and it is important for you guys because I guarantee, unless you happen to one day be the oldest person on the planet, one day you're going to be younger than people for a long time. There's always going to be people that are older than you until you're that one person, the oldest man on the planet or oldest woman on the planet, whatever. But for a long time, you're going to have people older than you. And if you're following the Lord, you're going to be doing the right thing, which means you're going to come into contact with people who aren't. So 1 Timothy, very important book. Plus, I encourage you all to get involved in ministry. Not necessarily become a pastor. Maybe that's not your calling. Maybe that's not your gifting. But get involved in ministry. And once you are in ministry, suddenly you have to start talking with people, dealing with people, helping out people, and they might have sin in their life that needs dealing with, that needs tackling. And looking at 1 Timothy gives you a really good way to deal with that sin. How to be direct and loving. How to get to the point but be gracious. So, here we go, 1 Timothy.
Paul's first letter to Timothy. Paul spent many years traveling about and starting new churches, and he developed a large team of co-workers in this mission. Timothy was one of these. Paul was once in the city of Lystra, and he met Timothy's faithful mother and grandmother, and he was impressed by Timothy's passion and devotion to Jesus. And so Paul mentored him for many years and eventually started sending him on missions to different churches. And so when Paul got word about a group of leaders who infiltrated the influential church in Ephesus, they were spreading incorrect views about Jesus and what it means to follow him, he sent Timothy to confront these leaders and restore order to this church. So after Timothy arrived there, Paul sent this letter to follow up and instruct him on how to fulfill this mission. The letter has a really cool design. There's an opening and closing commission to Timothy to go confront these leaders and their bad theology. And then these surround two large central sections that are full of really practical instructions about the problems that Timothy faced in the Ephesian church. And then finally, all these sections are linked together or concluded by a series of 3 poems that each exalt the risen Jesus as the King of the world. Let's dive in and you'll see how it works. Paul opens by recalling how he sent Timothy to Ephesus to confront these leaders who were spreading their strange teaching. And he describes how these guys are obsessed with speculating about the Torah, specifically the early stories and genealogies in the book of Genesis. And as we'll see, they had developed all kinds of weird teachings about food and marriage and sex that weren't consistent with the teachings of Jesus or the apostles. He even names some of these people, Alexander and Hymenaeus, and he describes how their teaching has divided the church, it's generated controversy. And Paul says this is actually the first clear sign that their teaching is distorted. When genuine Christian teaching is done, it's faithful to the way of Jesus, and it results in love and genuine faith. And he says the purpose of the Torah anyway isn't to fuel speculation. Rather, its purpose is to expose the truth about the human condition, as it did for Paul. Correct teaching about the Torah will lead people to see the grace of God revealed in the Messiah who came to save sinful, broken people. And so Paul closes here with a poem that honors King Jesus over all, and he calls Timothy to shut these men and their false teaching down. He then addresses very specific problems in this church caused by the false teachers. First of all, he calls Timothy to hold regular church prayer gatherings, to pray for the governing leaders of Rome and for peace. Because peace in the land, it creates an ideal setting for Jesus' followers to keep spreading their message about the God of peace, who wants all people to be saved, the God who sent Jesus as the only mediator to give his life as a ransom for all. In contrast to the false teachers, Paul reminds Timothy that God wants to rescue the whole world, and prayer is going to keep this at the forefront of their minds. Paul then addresses problems related to men and women who are being influenced by these corrupt leaders in Ephesus. So he first shuts down a group of men who were getting drawn into angry theological disputes started by the teachers. He says these guys should learn how to pray. Then he confronts a group of wealthy women in the church who were treating the Sunday gathering like a fashion show. They were dressing so upscale that they would shame most of the other people who couldn't afford such a wardrobe. And not only that, but some of these women were also usurping leadership positions in the church, and they were teaching others the bad theology of the corrupt teachers. And so Paul shuts these women down. He says they should not teach or lead in the church. And then he goes on to explore the story of Adam and Eve and the serpent from Genesis chapter 3. Now, this is one of those sections in Paul's letters where, like Peter said, he's kind of hard to understand. There are many different views about what Paul meant here. Some think that Paul is prohibiting women from ever teaching or leading men in any church, and that his comments about Adam and Eve are about how God has ordered that only men should be leaders in the church. There are others who think that Paul is prohibiting women from having leadership authority over men in a church, but that once educated women should and can teach as leaders in a church under male leadership. And there are still others who think that Paul is only prohibiting these women in Ephesus, and that his comments about Adam and Eve are a comparison of how these women have been deceived by the false teachers. Whichever view you take, Paul is clear that these Ephesian women need to come under Timothy's leadership and get a proper theological education. And the goal is to help them grow so that they could one day become like the outstanding female ministers that Paul mentions in his other letters, like Phoebe or Junia or Priscilla. Paul continues to address this leadership crisis, and he calls Timothy to appoint a small, healthy team of husbands and fathers who will act like elders or overseers for the church. These should be men of outstanding character and integrity, and they will work alongside a team of deacons. It's a Greek word that means servant. And these are men and women who actually lead and do the ministries of the church, and they are to have the same kind of character as the elders. And all together, these people should be known for healthy relationships in their families, because that will demonstrate their ability to lead in the church, which is God's family. And the way of life that they live all together, it's consistent with the story about Jesus, which is explored in the closing poem, about his incarnation, his death, his resurrection, his exaltation as king, and then the spread of his new family throughout the whole world. Paul's second body of instructions for Timothy are, again, very specific to the problems caused by these bad leaders. So he first corrects their bad theology. They've been telling people to stop eating certain kinds of foods, most likely meat, and to stop getting married, which Paul thinks is ridiculous. So he goes to Genesis 1, and he reminds Timothy that God's entire creation is very good, including food and marriage. It is all to be received with gratefulness by those who know and give thanks to the Creator. Paul then moves on to address problems about the church's care of widows. So this very important ministry was being taken advantage of by younger, wealthy widows, most likely the same troublemaking women from chapter 2. They would sign up for the church's support, but then spend their days sleeping around, spreading gossip, and damaging the church's reputation in the city. Paul is having none of it. He says that only older widows that have no other family support qualify, and for these, the church should show the love and generosity of Jesus. Paul then addresses problems among some older men in the church, and Timothy is to respect their age, but not their misbehavior. which seems to be alcohol related. They're damaging the church's reputation in Ephesus. And so Timothy is in love to confront them and have them step down if they're in leadership. And then Paul adds this interesting side note that this doesn't mean that Timothy himself should never drink. Given his stomach problems, he should probably have a glass of wine each night with dinner. Paul then addresses a problem among Christian slaves. Some of them were disrespecting their Christian masters. And so yes, the gospel creates equality among Jesus' followers. However, Paul thinks that equality needs to be implemented in a strategic way that doesn't compromise the mission and witness of the church. If Christians become associated with slave rebellions, they are compromised. The Christian transformation of the Roman household had to be implemented strategically so that their neighbors could be persuaded and not repulsed by this new vision of God's family. Finally, Paul closes the letter by calling Timothy again to confront the corrupt leaders. Paul here exposes their motives to make lots of money by accumulating followers and then charging them all high rates for their teaching. These teachers betray Jesus and his message of contentment and simple living. And so Paul instructs the wealthy Ephesian Christians to become rich in good works and generosity, to be people who submit all of their resources to King Jesus, and he's the one who inspires the final poem about how he is the true king above all other kings. 1 Timothy is a really important letter. It helps us gain a holistic vision of the nature and mission of the church. So what a Jesus community believes will directly shape how that community lives and behaves in its city. And so its theology, its beliefs have to be constantly critiqued and formed by the scriptures and the good news about Jesus. And how the church is perceived in public is also very important to Paul. Christians should be known as people who are full of integrity, known for good works, known for serving the poor and the most vulnerable, all out of devotion to the risen King Jesus. And that's what 1 Timothy is all about.
Alrighty, time to open up your Bibles.
Mine's already
Real
open.
quick, what was those elders' scriptural backing for like the no marriage and no meat?
Really isn't one. So what they were claiming though is that if there's something wrong with something and God punishes what you are doing that's wrong, then it should be gone forevermore. And so if marriage is running aground and God's like, hey, that's evil, why are you doing that in your marriage? Then apparently God's against marriage. So they were stretching God's responses to bad situations to cover all situations that involve what the bad situation was about. So if someone misuses God's eating laws or disobeys God's eating laws, then just skip over all the foods involved. Just get over it and don't do away with it. The meat one was specifically because of idol sacrifices. So if you can't be sure that the meat doesn't get sacrificed to idols, then just no more meat. It's gone from your diet. You're not allowed, which is ridiculous. But yeah, Paul's already tackled that in other books, in other cities, at other times. But it was never such a big problem as it was here because it was getting taught in the church by the church leaders rather than someone trying to break into the church, someone trying to enter the church from the outside. This was coming up from the inside.
Does this mirror how the Pharisees kind of rose to like the weird laws and like because these kind of have some very similar parallels?
Pretty close, yeah.
Isn't there a passage though? I think it's Paul. It says like it's better for a priest, or it's better for you to not marry. You'll have less trouble in your life.
Yes.
Do people take that the wrong way too?
Yes, and I don't know if that was in Ephesus. We actually mentioned this in Thessalonica. It became a problem because Paul was the guy who said, marriage is
might be better not.
It'd be better if you were single. Right. He says, like me, and which is interesting because Paul was once married. Right. So it's interesting that he says it like that. But what he was getting at, and he was very specific when he said it, and so it's like you guys really shouldn't be able to take this out of context.
That was probably one of the passages that they probably could have taken.
They could have cited it, and if they just quote part, then it's easy to mess up. What he was saying was marriage is good, singleness is good. Right. If your mission is serving God, singleness is better. But then he finishes by saying, and that's the part you can chop off and mess up the whole thing. He says, but if not being married will cause you to be tempted. So if being single will cause you to be tempted, get married. That's his finish. Just get married. He says the temptation's not worth it. Yeah. If you're going to be tempted as a single person, just get married.
people can still serve the Lord.
Totally.
So,
Yeah, totally. There's no roadblocks there that you can't get past. Paul's just saying there's less roadblocks to think about
right.
if you're single. So, yeah. Anyway, so open up to Timothy. What I want to look at first is the part in the video where it said that it was confusing and people are like, I don't know what this means. Well, there's 3 possibilities here. I'd like to read through this piece of scripture with you guys and see which possibility sounds most likely to you based on what it actually says. Because I think it's hilarious sometimes when people argue about stuff that isn't complicated. But that's okay. People like to argue, and we'll let them. We just don't have to partake. So we're gonna start up. I'm in 2 Thessalonians all of a sudden. How did that happen? There we go. Page turn. Okay. So start up in chapter 2. We're gonna go over to verse 8. Okay, so the topic here, as you'll see in verse 8, is gathering for worship. So this is a church service. This is not necessarily all day, every day. This is not every moment of your life. This is not in every situation. This is specifically in church, at church. Church is happening. Okay, people are gathered together. We're worshiping God. We're learning about God. That is the context. So check it out. Verse 8. In every place of worship, I want men to pray with holy hands lifted up to God, free from anger and controversy. What do you guys think that means? Anyone?
Oh, they were competing singing-wise with each other. My voice is better than yours.
I would say it's a strong possibility that worship was a competition. Yeah.
I also think it means that, like, when they were talking about no meat eating and no marriage, I think they were doing that with like anger, like to show people, like kind of make it more dramatic, so people were like thinking, wow, they're enthusiastic. It has to be real.
The no meat eating songs.
And so I think he means don't have like not needed anger. I mean, anger is not a sin; it's an emotion. But do not just have random anger.
Well, I think a big part of it is the context again, in a place of worship. So if you have a dispute with me on something doctrinal, something in the Bible, you think it means A and I think it means B, that's fine. We can disagree. But once we get to church, we're here to worship God. This is not the place where you and I have an argument. This is not the place where you and I crack open our Bibles while everybody else is trying to sing and we're like, no, it says this. It's like, guys, that's not what we're here for. So just, it's context, it's
like
timing.
Disrespecting God.
Exactly. You don't come into the house of worship and then say, oh, put a pause on worship, we need to finish our argument. That's not okay. So he says, in a place of worship, what does he say he wants you to do? Pray. Lift up your hands. I don't know, worship. But no anger, no controversy. There's no arguments when we're here for worship. There's no arguments when we're here as a group for church. That's not going to help the group. If I sat here and had an argument with someone, well, we should be worshiping or we should be reading the Bible, that doesn't actually move anyone closer to God. It doesn't accomplish the goal. Yeah.
It's also out of respect for God, because it's like, I don't know, it's like you'd be like going to a wedding and then like getting in a fight with your parent, like in the crowd while they're like doing their ceremony.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's just disrespectful to people getting married. It's like this is their time.
There's a moment in time dedicated to something. Let it be for that thing.
And then everybody starts picking sides.
It's just the worst.
It's not about God anymore.
Okay, so now read with me verses 9 and 10. We'll just move on. It's still, the context is at church while church is happening, but look at what 9 and 10 says. And I want women to be modest in their appearance. They should wear decent and appropriate clothing and not draw attention to themselves by the way they fix their hair, by wearing gold or pearls or expensive clothes. For women who claim to be devoted to God should make themselves attractive by the good things they do. So what do you think that means? Yeah.
Church is not the place for dressing up.
Church is not the place for dressing up. I think that's pretty straightforward.
Drawing attention to yourself.
Now, I think this passage could easily apply to men, but remember, we're in context. Paul's writing to a church where these things are happening. And the men had problems, but it wasn't dressing up. Okay? Their problems were they were arguing. So if you're in a church and there's guys dressing up competing with each other, look how snazzy my suit is, the verse still applies. it still says don't dress up, don't impress people, don't try and make it all about you. It applies to the guys and the girls. But in Ephesus, this is what the girls were having problems with. The guys, they were arguing. That was their problem. So he's writing to each specific group what their specific problem is. Yeah.
When I was younger and I read this verse, I got really scared thinking that braids might be sinful.
Ooh, braids, man.
So,
that's really
it's a
showing off.
cultural thing.
It's almost
so
as bad as
in that
pigtails.
day and age, it was like being really showy if you wore a lot of jewelry and like.
Oh, you mean
no.
here?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. So
sorry,
like,
thank
but
you.
Here, in this day and age,
Yes.
it's like it's not like if you walk in with a braid, the nose.
Yes,
is
in
like,
the original
like,
translation where it
shocked.
says fix your hair, it actually talks about braided hair. And so for a long time, some Christians actually thought that the hair braid was the problem that Paul had.
Let's
That-
use an old Satanist cult.
Oh man, don't braid your hair, Christians, that's evil. But that's not what the problem was. The problem was they were showing off.
It's your heart.
It's a heart problem. How you show off is so much less important. It's the fact that you were even trying to show off. That's the real problem.
Yeah.
And so if it is a hair braid, then don't braid your hair.
Everybody should just get church
But if you braid
mandated
your hair-
sackcloths.
Because you want a braid in your hair? If you braid your hair so it's out of your face, that's okay. But if you're braiding your hair to show off, yeah, that's actually a problem. It's all about what is the heart intent. It's same goes for clothes. Putting on a fun set of clothes to go to church, that's okay. Putting on a set of clothes so you can show off that set of clothes or show off how you look, yeah, that's a problem. And it doesn't matter if it's fancy clothes that you're showing off with or a name brand that you're showing off with or a logo that you're showing off with. If you're showing off, if you're dressing to impress, that's the problem. It's a big deal. Yeah.
So like how you're saying, like doing it like dressing up nicely, like, but just doing it cause like, or not doing it to show off, just doing it cause like, you don't want to like look like messy. You want to look nice
Sure.
for it, like how like Catholics do it. So like that's fine, right?
Well, again, it's the heart issue. It's going to be different for each person. Some people, I mean, I remember dressing up as a kid to go to church because my mom told me to dress up.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that was a sin. I was obeying my parents. But if I was dressing up each Sunday and I was like, I'm going to look better than all the other kids in Sunday school, or I'm going to impress that person, then that's the problem. So I would say it doesn't matter if you're Catholic or not. If you're dressing up and your intent is to make people look at you, yeah, I think that's a problem. But if you're dressing up because you like to look good when you go to worship God, maybe you want to feel like this is a special moment in time, you want to make that moment special, and that's how one of your ways you're making it special, I think that's okay. I don't have a problem with dressing up when you go to church. It's the heart issue. Why are you dressing up? Is it something you're doing for God, or is it something you're doing for yourself? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I think you can dress up for God. I think that's actually a thing, as weird as that might sound to some of
It
us.
would be for respect, wouldn't it?
Yeah, something out of respect. You know, I wear my crummy clothes when I do crummy things. I wear my nice clothes when I'm going to go do something nice. I think that's okay. But it really does come back to the heart issue. So you just have to check yourself. It's not complex. Just check. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Yeah?
My mom grew up Catholic, and they had to dress up to go to church, and they viewed it as a respect thing.
Yeah.
And it would be disrespectful if they showed up in like sweatpants and a t-shirt. They'd think they were being disrespectful to God. Even though that might not have been their heart, it would have been a distraction. So in that case, it was almost like flip-flops.
I think that's a really
As
good
far
point,
as
too.
our
If
church
you go to a
goes,
church where that's the custom,
that's just the custom.
and you, like, don't want to follow the custom, you're like, yeah, I'm going to wear whatever the heck I want.
See, Paul backs me on this.
You're going to actually distract people and draw attention to yourself by not dressing up, as weird as that might sound.
That was my point.
Yeah,
Thank
but you
you.
got to make
So-
a Christian statement for God, Daniel.
So you could literally sin in this way by not dressing up,
Opposite.
as weird as that might sound. So yeah, it's totally contextual. It has to do with where you are and what's happening. Yeah.
So like for the people who like, right, for the people who like, let's say someone puts on a shirt, they do not like that shirt. They put on a new shirt, they think, I like this shirt. Other people will think I like this shirt. They are not doing it to impress people. They just think, oh, so and so will like this logo. They'll think it's funny. Does that count as like doing it to impress someone?
Interesting. You're doing it for the enjoyment of them?
Yeah,
I think there's a
it's
slight
mostly-
difference there. That's subtle though.
I mean,
That's
in the
really
context that Paul has it, it's dressing up to impress as opposed. It's like
They were trying
getting
to
a
draw
name
attention.
brand shirt. It's
They
like,
were
oh,
trying
this
to draw
is
attention to
this is a
themselves.
$300 shirt. I'm gonna wear this to church because people are gonna see this Nell logo. They're gonna know the
Got
shirt's
my
expensive.
rhinestones.
I think there is a slight difference between drawing attention to yourself, putting on something so people will notice you, so that people will pay attention to you, and literally having a friend
And just being
who will get a
yourself.
kick out of this. And you're like, I'm going to put this on because I know it's going to make them laugh. Like, I'm going to put this on because I know it's going to put a smile on their face. I think that's actually just over that line in the gray area where you're actually being loving. Does that kind of make sense? You go there thinking, I'm going to put a smile on their face. They're going to get a kick out of this. I think you just crossed over the gray area to where that can actually be can be a positive thing. But it's really tricky. You gotta really be careful. And really the answer in all of this, even in one of the areas we haven't mentioned, which is modesty. In each of these cases, I think the real trick is just pray. Talk to God. If you actually involve God in your getting dressed in the morning, you will do so much better. You will do so much better. And I know that sounds a little weird to some of us because we just like grab something off the shelf or we just look at everything and go, what do I want to wear? Honestly, it's so strange, but the way you're going to look the entire day, you might just, want to ask the creator of the universe how he feels about that. What if the shirt you wore opened up a conversation you wouldn't have otherwise had? God would know that, and you wouldn't. So yeah, you might want to ask him. He might have something to say about it. One last thing, Adam, and then we'll move on to the next paragraph.
So the thing about like wearing it, cause like if you don't like dressing up, cause like if you don't, that you'd be seen as disrespectful.
Sure.
That all relates back to like what Paul said with eating the food that was like cooked as a sacrifice or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Don't
Don't
say
trip
something
up
we
other
do.
Christians. That was one of his golden rules for any gray area. If there's something that isn't necessarily a sin either way, you can choose option A or B, and neither one is directly a sin. He says, figure out if you're going to trip anyone up. If you're going to make them go, oh, he did what? He says, then just avoid it. Just avoid it. You might have freedom from God to do that thing, but if you're going to mess with another Christian by doing it, he says, just skip it. You don't really need it that badly. You don't really need it.
Okay, so I mean, I think we're gonna approach this in a bit, but say you're.
We're out of time, so we might not.
Oh, okay. So like this is tying two of the things together. What if you're in a church where a lot of people dress up to impress, and you dress normal, and the elders who are like following like not true doctrine try and call you out on it, say you need to dress to impress. I mean, kind of similar.
That's interesting. But you're not in charge.
So like I'm not in charge. It's not my position to call them out.
That is one of the twistiest situations in the world. When you go to a church that you aren't on the leadership, and you can see the entire church doing something that's wrong, and you're doing what's right, but they all think you're doing what's wrong. This happens more times than you might think. And the thing you are supposed to do, based on the whole body of Scripture, because this isn't referenced directly that I know of,
Right.
is pray for the leaders. Because going to the leaders who didn't necessarily sin against you, they're doing what they think is right, it won't work.
Okay, but how would you then dress up as what you feel is wrong? Would you still disrespect the leaders? by
No.
continuing to go?
You never, ever sin to please someone else. That completely goes against God. Never would you sin to go with what someone else says.
But is that the
Ever.
whole, but isn't that what you mean by like gray areas when you like say like if someone thinks this is wrong, do the other thing? Like if you're doing the right
But
thing.
that was only in a gray area, which means neither one was necessarily wrong. He's saying
Oh, if they're doing something that's wrong.
if they want you to do something that's wrong, that's not a gray area anymore. So the Bible's way clear on that. If something is actually wrong, don't do it. It doesn't matter who wants you to do it. It doesn't matter if they're in charge of your church and they
So
want
in
you
this
to do
scenario,
it.
it would be
If
better
it's wrong, don't
to
do it.
essentially like challenge their leadership and not do their wrong. saying
Challenge
wrong.
their leadership is a very strong phrase. I can't endorse that.
That's okay. That's fair.
not
But
tell them to
but in the
church.
context, it would be like doing it despite what they told you, right?
Andrew.
Yes,
If it happens,
and
just
the
don't go back
problem
to that
is you're
church.
supposed to respect their authority at all times, which means if they go so far as to say, we want you to leave the church because you're not respecting our authority, you would do it.
Gotcha.
You would literally leave the church because they said they want you to do it. You're not to cause divisions. That's one of Paul's other big pieces in Christianity. Don't
Even
cause
if it-
divisions with anything you do, even
even-
with your doctrine. He says, even if you know you're right on your doctrine and you are in charge in the church, he says you don't cause divisions. You just state what the truth is and you leave it. You state what the truth is and you leave it. I mean, if you're in charge, you're allowed to confront sin. If someone goes against you directly in sin, you're allowed to confront them on that. But if someone is just going to keep on teaching what they're teaching and you're not in charge, you don't cause division. You just state the truth and walk away. State the truth and leave it. God's going to keep working on them. You're going to keep praying for them. The truth was stated. They know what it is. You're not going to change their heart. That's not your job. That's not your power. You don't have super heart-changing powers. You just
Aaron's
state the
good
truth.
point, but maybe.
You state the truth and you keep praying. And then, yeah, maybe that was your superpower that day because God will change their heart. But it was never you. God might use you, but it was never you. It's going to be him every time.
Where's Emily?
And so you might, she's sick, I'm sick, Jane's sick, we're all sick. God might use what you did, but that's what he's going to use. Is you being peaceful, you being calm, you stating the truth, you being loving, you praying for them. That's what he's going to use. He's not going to use you challenging people and arguing with them and saying, you're all wrong, I'm taking you all down. He's not going to use that. That's not how God works. So Paul only gets to do this stuff because he's actually in charge. And so the tables turn when you are in the position of authority versus when you are dealing with people in authority. It's two different situations.
Now, Paul is in authority via like God, essentially, right? Because
He's
like he is
twice over. He's in authority because he's being used as an apostle, someone God is speaking through. But he's also in authority because he started this church.
Oh, that's right. I completely forgot that. Because
He's the one who helped them all become Christians once upon a
I was
time.
thinking Paul
And
was
so
an
like he's
outsider
the
for
head guy in the sense of I brought you guys all to Christ.
Yeah, gotcha.
So he has authority twice over as an apostle and as the starter of the church. So he gets a special place in the chain of command. It's a little different for him. He can just say stuff and be like, do it. When you're in authority, you have that option. And sometimes we don't because we're not in authority. All right, last thing, and this is the part that really confuses people. Listen to verse 11 through 15. Tell me what you think it says. Women should learn quietly and submissively. Do not let women teach men or have authority over them. Let them listen quietly. For God made Adam first, and afterward he made Eve. And it was not Adam who was deceived by Satan. The woman was deceived, and sin was the result. But women will be saved through childbearing, assuming they continue to live in faith, love, holiness, and modesty. So the first thing, guys don't argue, was that simple? Yeah. Ladies, don't show off at church. Was that simple?
Yeah.
How about that last part? Does that sound simple?
I think it goes back a few books earlier when it
Sure.
talks about how God programmed women to instinctually want to lead, and it's hard for us to step back and let men lead. And, you know, most men are prone to lead, but some aren't.
I think a lot of men are prone to be lazy.
We are supposed to encourage them to lead.
Yeah.
And so I think that can definitely, it's easy, like I know personally, and women in my family and myself included, it's so easy for me to just want to take charge and like correct or start teaching or hold back. So it's hard for me to.
It's tough.
So I mean, it sounds harsh, but it makes a lot of
Okay, so it's question and answer time, and then we gotta go. What do you guys think this means?
Dion,
Take it as simply as you possibly can. What do you think it means?
you're breaking it.
None of the ladies want to raise their hand on this one? All right, the guys think they know what it means. Go for it.
I think it means
Start digging.
not helping.
Go for it.
Okay. So I think what it means is it doesn't necessarily mean that a woman should not like teach at church. They totally can. Like Bud's wife, she
Women
teaches.
should learn quietly and submissively. Let them listen quietly. Keep going.
But you know, she teaches. So like, I don't think he's saying that women cannot teach at all in the church. I think what he's saying is they should not, since they do have that like nature where they just want to get up and lead, unlike the men where they're just lazy and just on the couch.
Sure.
I think they make it so, yeah, they do it like that because if they did have that happen, then like 8 women would stand up, they'd be like, and it would just like be an entire argument of just women, and then the men would finally be like, but that's not true, and it would just be chaos. in the entire room.
Okay,
so.
I think I can take a
You wanna-
stab
you wanna
at
try
this.
and fix this?
This is
I got it.
going towards God's structure of a family.
It
Because
is.
The man has to be the head of the household, and even if the wife disagrees, out of respect for how God has orchestrated the household, needs to be submissive, right?
Well put, Aaron.
So
no,
in this
he's
scenario,
right. He's right.
if you
Paul
have-
tackles this in another place. Peter tackles it in another
If
place.
you have
And it
a
does.
woman teaching in a congregation in which both her husband and her father could be in there, you're like usurping the role that they have in the family.
For sure.
So if you have a husband that then has to be submissive to the wife in the orchestration of the church, which is supposed to resemble the body of Christ, which is also being resembled by how a marriage is structured, it isn't beneficial for anybody to have that power structure be thrown out of balance.
So we're out of time, but you guys have both hit this really, really well. The only thing you guys both missed, which I would add, and then you just kind of combine all three, and I think you'll kind of get there, is that the first part was contextual for Ephesus. The second part was contextual for Ephesus. Please don't, as many people have tried to do, think, oh, well, this is general and it applies to everyone all the time. No. This was at church, this was in Ephesus that he was saying this. So what does that tell you? This tells you the opposite was already happening. So the video wasn't like all wrong. It just gives you three arguments and then never really decides which one is the correct choice. That's a problem for me. I gotta know what the word says. I gotta know what the Bible actually means. I can't just be like, well, it's one of these three, I don't know. So contextually, in Ephesus, this means women were not quiet. Remember what he said? They'd all get up and they'd start shouting? Paul says they need to do this. In each part so far, he said it because the opposite was already happening. So he says, let them learn quietly and submissively. What does that tell you they were doing already? They were being loud, and they were taking control from people. They were not being submissive. So the opposite was happening. Loudmouthed women trying to take control of everyone. This is what was going on in Ephesus. So, yeah, don't do that, Paul says. The second thing here is that he says, don't let them teach the guys. Don't let them teach the guys. So what do you think was happening?
They were teaching the guys.
They were teaching the guys. This is pretty straightforward. We're just interpreting it the same way we interpreted everything else. If there's a problem, tackle the problem. He's not just giving general instruction about how a church works. He's saying, guys, you have problems in your church, and here's what you need to do to fix it. So the women were getting up and taking control of everything, and I don't know if the video is right about, what they were teaching, because that's never specified. They're guessing. But I think it's a pretty good guess. They were teaching the stuff that Paul's already tackling in the whole rest of this letter. I think that makes sense. So think about this for a second. Andrew mentioned that thing about family structure. Part of the bad doctrine was marriage is a bad idea. So you've got women getting up in front of the entire church saying that marriage is a bad idea. That doesn't sound very good. That doesn't sound very good at all. Yeah.
Given the context, it sounds like there might not have been a lot of hearts in the right place also.
Yeah, no, this wasn't a good motive. Really, what's the point of the church? To lift up the Christians, to move forward the gospel. Not to get up and start bickering about marriage. That wasn't really ever the intent or the goal. So, I don't think this is as much a general idea about everything that, better keep women in their place. I think this is a specific tackle. This is a specific problem. That things were falling apart. That women were getting up in front of the church and saying, marriage is a bad idea and don't you dare eat these things. And that's not good. That's not good. And so Paul's saying, you know what? Don't bicker in church. Don't show off at church. Don't go having all these different teachers getting up, loudmouth, shouting about different things. He says, peace, quiet, calm, order. This is what should be in church. Not chaos, not randomness, not let any idea in. He says, no. Stick to the essentials. Look at the list at the end. Faith, love, holiness, modesty. He says, this is what all the women should be striving for. So what does that tell me? They weren't practicing faith. They weren't having love for people. They weren't being holy, and they weren't modest.
Big problem.
That's a big problem. All right, so this is the point. As he keeps going, he says everyone should start striving to be a servant. Everyone should start pushing themselves to become a servant. He starts describing how to become a deacon. That's something we want to try even harder right now in our church to get. And we're doing it. We're starting to bring in more deacons, more people who are just going to serve. And I encourage you guys to start looking for opportunities in your home, in your neighborhood, and here at church to just serve. Just get down on your hands and knees and scrub a floor. Go work with little preschoolers. do whatever you can to help out. Whether it be in your family, whether it be in your neighborhood, or whether it be here at the church. Do that. That's what I see in 1 Timothy is don't take charge, don't try and usurp power from people, don't try and be loudmouth, just be humble, be modest, and do the work God has for you. All right, let's pray. Lord, we thank you for the book of 1 Timothy. We thank you that we have such a great author in your servant, Paul. We just ask, Lord, that we would take these messages to heart, that we wouldn't try and show off, we wouldn't try and argue, we wouldn't try and be the center of attention, but we would be willing and we'd be excited to serve your people. Help us to do that even when we're at home. Sometimes that's the hardest place, to be humble, to be modest, to be a servant. But Lord, help us to also do it here in your family, in this extended family we have of all these Christians. Help us to find ways to become more like a deacon. May we strive to have the qualities mentioned in chapter 3. May we strive to be on your team of dedicated servants, ready to do anything you ask of us. And we ask all that in your name, Jesus. Amen. All right, guys, get on out of here. Dudes, men, there's a Nerf night on March 3rd. Oh, yikes, Aaron,
I'll get you.
no killing junior high. That's cool.
March 3rd, guys, at junior high.
Is that this
boys
next Friday?
Nerf nights.
Oh, my phone.
Winner.
Yeah.
You get it?
Oh.
You must make a giant shield that takes up the entire
You there was past
Or
time.
maybe should I bring one because I already have
That's
one.
not a bad
already
idea.
made.
No, I have some extra cardboard.
We don't have anything
Yeah,
else.
like, I already have it. Yeah, I already have it made. It's like great.
I know.
Wait, where did your animal
It has a shield.
My
That's
three
actually what
little
I
tiny
meant.
furry
You're like
creatures.
parent.
It's my favorite.
So,
That's
Wait, okay,
that's
Daniel.
sick.
Daniel, I got a great idea. We need to find refrigerator box.
Yes. Okay.
And a little bit of plexiglass.
Okay.
I'll actually see. Maybe I can come
Completely down
here.
around here. So we get a plexiglass window and then a tiny little hole just enough for a barrel to stick through. And you're just a walking tank.
Oh, you're talking about Nerf night. I thought you
Yeah.
were talking about a jail for people who aren't calm and non-chaotic in
That's
church.
not a bad idea though. I do like that idea.
Learn quietly.
Yeah.
Get in the jail.
But you can walk around with it. You got a tiny